Hi students. So this next video is going to be all about imperialism. So this European idea of going out into different areas during the 1800s and the 1900s and going out and getting colonies and this recolonization effort. So why imperialism? What are going to be some of these causes? And a lot of it has to come down to new markets, more raw materials, missionaries, and being able to go out and convert people into Christianity. The idea that you need military bases and naval bases, more industrial technological advancements. uh, you know, People were trying to now spread technology or use this new technology onto less civilized people. And that kind of leads into the last thing, this ideological movement that a lot of Europeans had. And there's two different types of these ideological movements. One is called the white man's burden, in which Europeans specifically felt that it was up to them specifically to go and re-civilize these areas because they need, the Europeans' help. I mean, it's a extremely racial overtones that we're talking about here, but these were the ideas of this white man's burden. We'll get into, the literature aspects of that in a little bit. And then the other one is social Darwinism, this idea of survival of the fittest. That people just felt that Europeans were is a superior thing, and that if they aren't strong enough to defend against Europeans, specifically in Africa and Asia, then you know what? Too bad. That's just kind of the way that it is. So when we're talking about the two main regions for imperialism, we are specifically talking about Africa and Asia, mostly because most of the lands in Latin America at this point are, have already been, revolutionized during, the 1800s, breaking away from Spain, or the United States is getting, more involved in those areas. So Africa and Asia seem to be more open markets for these countries to go out and have this imperialism occur. So we're going to talk about Africa first. This idea, this scramble for Africa with all of these European countries. And usually when we think of Africa, one of the first countries we're going to really talk about is going to be England and England's involvement into the region. And England really gets involved with Egypt to kind of start everything all out with, in which they invest in the Suez Canal. And there's going to be the Suez Canal, crisis, later, going on with this. But the Suez Canal kind of maintains stability into this region that England is kind of putting into their own, government systems and everything to make this whole Egyptian thing work. Cecil Rhodes proposes to build a railroad that's going to go across Africa. It never happens. England's involved in two different Boer Wars in which they're fighting the Afrikaners in South Africa. Okay, and later South Africa is going to be the whole apartheid issue. And then you have the De Beers family with diamonds. So they really do kind of put their mark into Africa, and they start carving it out. Now, back home, you're going to have arguments between the conservatives and the liberals. In this case, the liberals is going to be William Gladstone, and these liberals do not want to have these ideas of social Darwinism and white man's burden. They don't think that imperialism is really a good thing, that maybe we should be focusing on the problems that are happening there in England. Where Benjamin Disraeli is a conservative in this case, and he says, no, let's go out there, let's go do our thing, let's go out, carve up Africa, and let's go into Asia. Why not? This is the way that England usually does things. And Queen Victoria, who is the monarch from most of this imperialism, is going to take the side of Disraeli, and she's not going to like Gladstone too much. And she's like, you know what? let's go out and go do these things and bring more things, into England. So there's always that political cartoon. It's called The Devilfish, and it's Gladstone, and he's like an octopus, and he's reaching out all over the place, and it's kind of talking about, definitely talking about the Suez Canal issues, but it's talking about how England, the sun never sets on the British Empire. This idea of them always going out there and grabbing new things. So England really does make its mark during this age of imperialism. So the British weren't the only ones that are carving up in Africa. The French were also there. They had Algeria, Tunisia. They also had Morocco. Okay, and this is where Casablanca, in the movie Casablanca during World War II, is going to come into play, and why the French are involved there. The Italians take Libya. They try to take Ethiopia. They lose. Ethiopia and Liberia are going to be the only two African nations that are going to resist European colonization during this age of imperialism. So kind of keep that in mind, that not every single African country is going to be, taken over during this time period. But when we really think about imperialism, usually the main person we think of is King Leopold II of Belgium. And Belgium held this area of what we would now know as the Congo, or Belgian Congo, kind of back then. And he's brutal. King Leopold, he does genocide, he tortures people, he's killing a lot of the Africans, he's not a good guy whatsoever. And King Leopold's just like, whatever, a few deaths is okay as long as it's bringing in the resources back into Belgium. So not every single one of these imperialistic things is going to be all about, oh yeah, the white man's burden and social Darwinism. No, you're also going to have greed involved as well. In fact, we're going to have, later I'm going to be discussing about how Vladimir Lenin said that imperialism was the highest stage of capitalism. But getting back into these European countries, you're going to have the Berlin Conference of 1885, and Otto von Bismarck kind of brings everybody together at this point, and he says, you know what, we need to come up with some rules, we need to come up with a way to stop all these political disputes with regards to imperialism. So, it does kind of help, where Bismarck's like, okay, you know what, you guys can take that land, you can take this land, you can take that land. So from that aspect, yes, okay, the Berlin Conference was somewhat successful, but does it solve all of the problems that's happening in Africa? Absolutely not. The other region is going to be Asia. And you're going to have a lot of countries, once again, just like how there's a lot of countries in Africa, there's going to be a lot of countries that are going to be involved with Asia. And really, the British are kind of involved in a lot of these main areas, like India, for example, in which the British called it the jewel of the crown. And the thing is that India really gets involved after the Sepoy Mutiny in 1857, in which they were able to put down this rebellion, and then the British start instituting their own reforms and administration inside of India. Now the thing is that they're not harsh with the Indians whatsoever, as they will be with other countries that you're going to be seeing, because they do put in their own education systems and their own educational reforms and whatnot. So they do acknowledge this India as a country in itself, just being one of the colonies for England. Other places in Asia, well, the Dutch, have places in Indonesia. The French have French Indochina, which is Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Germany has islands in the Pacific. Russia is even getting involved with their spheres of influence into this Asia. They into Persia, into Asia, which is going to be Iran. And with regards to China, a lot of this Western influence starts with the Opium Wars of the 1830s, in which they signed the Treaty of Nanjing, which the Chinese are forced to sign it, which opens up this drug trade into China. Okay, so there's going to be other things involved that it's going to weaken Chinese help. In fact, the Taiping Rebellion, where 20 million people are going to be killed, that the British get involved to kind of put it down, and it weakens the Chinese government that's there as well. Then you also have the open door policy, which is this idea of everyone coming into this area or into China and trading with the Chinese. The Americans use this open door policy in order to get involved. And with all these Westerners, you have the Boxer Rebellion. These people are called the Boxers, or the Harmonist Fists. And really, what they wanted is this uprising to try to get rid of all the Westerners into the area. And the Manchu dynasty at this time is all for it, and they side with the Boxers. But when the Boxers are put down, this dynasty really loses a lot of their momentum, a lot of their reign, a lot of their power. And it makes it very easy for this dynasty to collapse by 1911, where Sun Yat-sen is going to come in and he's going to create a republic for China. So this end of this dynastic cycle that had been going on for thousands of years in China very, very quickly because of imperialism. And what Sun Yat-sen pretty much was promoting is nationalism, democracy, and livelihood. That's what he was focusing on. Now, Japan is different. Japan, they opened up trade in 1853 with the Americans when Commodore Matthew Perry, not the guy from Friends, we're not talking about Chandler Bing, okay, when they open up these doors, they start to really modernize pretty quickly. And this was the Meiji Restoration, that they start to get technology to bring themselves all back in there. And, they fight a war here or there, but their biggest victory to know is in 1905 in this Russo-Japanese War, in which they win and they beat the Russian Empire, this massive Russian Empire. And a lot of that is going to be when I talk about the causes of World War I and Russian Revolution. This defeat of Russia and the Russian Empire really kind of leads into the ideas of the Russian Revolution and trying to remove Nicholas II and the Romanov family from power. And this win for Japan really puts them on the main stage, in which people are like, oh wow, look at Japan go. Like, they're actually, a very big power. The Philippines, the United States is getting involved in this area with the Philippines after the Spanish-American War of 1898. There was going to be a Filipino revolution in which the Americans do put it down, and America will own the Philippines up until World War II, when the Japanese will force Douglas MacArthur off and he'll say, I shall return. Okay, so there is, different areas and different countries we're getting involved. And depending on how these European countries, reacted with these, Asian countries, that's how things are starting to shape up going into this 20th century with World War I and World War II. And thing is, a lot of people are talking about this hypocrisy of colonization. That there really was, some people are saying, yes, we are trying to help these countries, and then at the same time you're looking at them and how these European countries were specifically treating these African and Asian countries, and it's like, this isn't what the original reasons were. This now starts to become more of a European or Western greed from everything. Now, different ideas are going to start to come out of this, philosophers, literature, and artwork, and one of your biggest theorists is going to be Nietzsche. And he's going to say that the decline of the West is because they have the slave morality to Christian values. So he starts saying, like, God is dead and everything along those lines. And Nietzsche's going to be one of the main influencers of Adolf Hitler and a lot of these fascists that are going to be popping up during the 1920s and 1930s. You have psychology coming into main studies with Sigmund Freud, who was talking about the subconsciousness, and that there's a lot of things that identifies people in the way that they're thinking because of what is happening or what has happened in their past. You have different artwork. You have expressionism like Vincent van Gogh and Paul Cézanne, abstract type of art. And then you have cubism with Pablo Picasso. that is going to form from this time period. And the cubism is going to be all your geometric shapes. And then literature. Rudyard Kipling, who writes the Jungle Book, who writes the actual thing called The White Man's Burden. And he grew up in India, so he kind of saw imperialism, firsthand point of view. But like I'd already said, India was one of the better places out of all the places that England during this imperialism time was kind of going through. Lenin writes about how imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. They said that a lot of your capitalists are going to go out and imperialize because they're trying to profit off of lower people. Okay, and then they're going to have the Heart of Darkness book. Okay, with this literature of Heart of Darkness, this idea that you're going into Africa and it's the dark continent, for whatever reasons that you can really come up with this. So you can see that even imperialism is affecting literature, affecting artwork, affecting ways of thinking overall. In fact, imperialism is going to be one of the main reasons why you're going to see World War I actually start. Especially since now, in order to imperialize, you're going to have larger militaries. And when you have larger militaries, you're going to want to use them. And I'm just foreshadowing of how imperialism will in fact cause the Great War or World War I. Thank you for watching this video about imperialism. Please subscribe if you would like to. I also have other videos going over a lot of AP European ideas. That's going to be helpful for either studying for a test, review, the AP exam. So thank you for watching this segment of AP European history, imperialism. Thank you. Keep on studying, and let's go get a 5 on that test.